Welcome to the Leaders Corner podcast, a program that puts you in touch with senior leaders from around the Army Reserve on issues that affect you. This is your chance to hear in-depth conversations that go beyond the talking points. Get first-hand insights on the future of the Army Reserve. All this and more exclusively on the official podcast of the U.S. Army Reserve, the Leaders Corner. Welcome to this edition of the Leaders Corner, a podcast dedicated to bringing you the voices of Army Reserve leadership in a way that's engaging, vibrant, and informational. I'm your host, Sergeant First Class Jeremiah Richardson, and today we're going to learn all about a new initiative the Army Reserve is doing called This Is My Squad. Here explaining it to us today is Command Sergeant Major of the Army Reserve, Ted Copeland. CSM Copeland brings over 30 years of Army experience to the table. He has been mobilized 5 times in his career and is a retired civilian police sergeant. He's from Wacaponita, Ohio, and seems from his background to quite enjoy working with firearms. Thanks for coming, Sergeant Major. Judging from your bio, it seems you're still something of a weapons guru.
Well, good morning. Not as much as I'd like to be anymore. Obviously, in this job, I haven't really had the opportunity to do it. But yeah, in my past, absolutely. Firearms instructor. Love to hit the range, shoot a few weapons, enjoy yourself. Absolutely.
Do you still have like a favorite sidearm or?
I tell you, I implemented in my department years ago. We went to H&Ks, 45s, full-size 45s. I'm a big fan of the 45 caliber because when I come in the Army, as you point out, my age, I'm a little elderly. We had the Colt 45s yet, so that's probably one of my favorite firearms.
Nice,
so, yeah.
Nice. So I'm going to get down to business. Can you explain to me this whole new campaign called This Is My Squad?
Oh, absolutely. I tell you, we don't want to make it complicated. But the Sergeant Major of the Army's intent is, to go away from not my squad, which was to help fix certain issues, to This Is My Squad, more of a positive message. We want to say, was the good stuff happening, but also we want to empower that young squad leader to take ownership of their squad, of their soldiers, whether it's training, whether it's, home issues, helping them out there, whatever they need, that squad leader and those team leaders, that's what non-commissioned officers are supposed to do.
Okay. Care
for their soldiers. So it's really to build a new campaign and a new culture to get back to what we probably did a little better 20 plus years ago. That is non-commissioned officers owning it, empowered to get after it and help their soldiers.
That kind of reminds me of some of our previous talks where we talk about how the tempo of what the Army's been through in recent years seems to have made some of that knowledge, get put on the back burner. I mean, is that part of the reason why?
Oh, absolutely. I think SMA, like myself, gets out and about and sees a lot. And we're not saying the non-commissioned officer corps is bad. What we're saying is how they've been trained and educated because of the high op tempo, all the deployments was not the same. It's just like you said, it's a lack of knowledge.
Right.
What we don't know, we don't know. And there is good pockets of activity going out there, and we got high-speed sergeants out here. And as I tell command teams all the time, they do great if they're told what to do.
Right.
Some will do it on their own, but most are waiting because they think they have to wait to be told. They don't have to wait. You see something needs to be done, that non-commissioned officer is supposed to step up and get her done. That's kind of how I was raised. I like to call it that way. That's how I was raised in the Army. And, the expectations was, Sergeant, why didn't you do it? And there's no excuse. Well, nobody said I had to. You were supposed to identify and do it. So we're trying to get back to that in more of a positive way, obviously. Of course, the SMA's message is down through the NCO Corps. Right now his message is mostly an information campaign.
Right.
So the way I look at this is right what I've been trying to do. This is my lines of effort since I've become the Army Reserve Sergeant Major is NCOs take charge. getting back to what we're supposed to do, what we're supposed to own. And it's just, as we talked before on a podcast, it's about education,
right?
Kind of training. But the biggest part is letting those young NCOs know they're empowered to do it.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah. But I also imagine Specialist Smith saying, well, here we go again, another good idea from the top. I mean, what would you say to him? Why should he buy it?
That's a good one, and I'd lay it out just like we're talking. Hey, young man, we have a lot of resources in our Army, and I was just talking to the company commander and first sergeant course commanders and first sergeants Monday, and it's like I've been telling command teams for 3 years, your biggest asset is your non-commissioned officer corps, and we're not using them.
Okay, so I hear you have a story. Tell me about it.
Oh, absolutely. I tell you, when I was a young platoon sergeant, and we had a couple new platoon leaders in the other platoons, and there was two of them, a command team, platoon leader, platoon sergeant in the same open barracks bay we were in, and they come up to the lieutenant and I and said, how do you guys do it? And we're like, do what? Well, when you get your platoon together and you're going to do something, it just seems people either know what they're doing, they listen and they do it, and they react, and, well, how do you do it? And I'm like, they do what they're told. They know what to do. Well, how do you do that? Let me show you. I said, squad leaders, come here. So my 3 squad leaders come up, and I said, all right, Sarge, let me ask you something. If I tell you I need X done, and I don't give you a time frame to get it done, what's that mean? It means do it right away. I give you a time frame, we get it done by that time frame, okay? What happens if you don't know what I'm asking? Well, we ask you, okay? Well, any other problems? Nope. All right, thanks. And the platoon leader and then the acting interim platoon sergeant said, well, how'd you do that? I said, because I trained them. I'd chew their behinds till they understood, here's the requirement, here's how to do it. If you've got questions, please ask, but otherwise I expect you to do it once you say you got it. That's where my motto, get out, move out and draw fires from.
Right.
Once you understand, it's get your behind out here, but instead of saying that, it's move out and draw fire.
You own those squads.
I own those squads.
Yeah, I'm kind of a history guru, and so I find it interesting that with the U.S. Army, the way our structure is, we allow that sort of, I don't want to say freelance, but ability of commanders and NCOs to figure out how they're going to do it best based upon guidelines. And it always seems to be a strength.
Yeah, it is. And, of course, we put official term to it probably 15, 20 years ago called mission command. When it's done on the individual level, it's just initiative. But that's what makes our Army so good. That's what makes our NCO Corps so good compared to our, other countries, because they don't train their young NCOs to think freely. The bottom line is you need to know the commander's intent, what the mission is, what the end results are supposed to be, and then you're supposed to build your plan with troop leading procedures and the op order and, start movement, develop a plan, all those things that, we used to grow up with. Because what happens when you actually start doing it, moving out, first contact or anything, anytime you move out, something happens and you got to think, readjust, and keep going because you know where you need to get to.
Right.
So this is just, this is my squad. When the SMA rolled this out before AUSA last year, it was like, yeah, perfect. This is exactly, this is what, we've been tackling in the Army Reserve since I come on board. And it's like, wow, this is what we're going to do. And if you talk to our sister countries, Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, all their reserve CSMs are telling me the same thing.
Right.
They have the same issues we do. So, some of it's how we've done business for 20 years because of the war. Some of it's cultural, how our soldiers, soldiers are all about high tech now and their phones. And, so it's different from our day when we had a manual and a notebook. That's what I went to the field with up through being a first sergeant was a couple FMs and a notebook.
Right.
So I know there's going to be skepticism out there, and as I said earlier, I know there's going to be, here's something else we got to do.
Right.
But as I've tried to tell NCOs in the last 3 years, I'm asking you to do what you need to be doing.
Right.
Should be doing already. So they say, well, we ain't got time. Then I'll say, well, what are you doing? And I'll say, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, and do this.
Right.
Because this will be the high, the payoff down the road. You train your squad, you get your soldiers trained, qualified. Now they're deployable, they're lethal, they're survivable because they know their jobs and they know their soldier skills.
Right. It seems to me that this is almost like an ownership thing. Like, this is my squad.
Exactly. I don't know. I don't get a sense when I talk to young NCOs, and even up through, I hate to say it, even up through E9s that come into the Army probably about the time of 9/11 happened, because of how we've done business, I don't feel that as a whole they feel that ownership. When I was a squad leader, a platoon sergeant, a first sergeant, I would develop some type of competition, whether it was real or, or it was a natural program, or it was just a perceived between teams, squads, platoons, not to cause strife or, anything like that, but to empower people. Because, if you come in the Army, you have some of an A personality.
Yeah.
You have pride. You may not think you do, and you may not talk like it, but you do. Mm-hmm. And you don't like to look bad. You're more of an aggressive type deep down. So that competition sparks that, where you think you have it or not. So, if you do something, recognize the best squad every month.
Yeah.
Or, every quarter of doing great stuff. The other squad leaders and squads like, well, we can do better than that. And then before you know, it's a competition. Everything's a competition.
Yeah.
Whether it's, loading out to move out, or whether it's range fire, whether it's PT, because everybody wants to say, hey, we're better than you.
Yeah.
My MP platoon, each platoon, we had all those Humvees and whip antennas. Each platoon had their own guidons on their whip antennas.
Right.
So, in the battlefield, you could tell which platoon it was just by their guidon on their whip antenna. But they all had their own call sign. They all had their own motto.
Yeah.
And they all said their motto, then the company motto at formation. It's just that esprit de corps. It builds, because I always felt as a non-commissioned officer that my element is going to be the best. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you are, sometimes you aren't. But I always strived, and I took that personally.
There's another aspect to this I kind of mentioned a little earlier, and that's that, let me tell a little bit of a story. So I was acting first sergeant for a year. And that whole ownership aspect I really took seriously. And I had my problem soldiers just like anybody else does. And I remember I had a soldier in a unit in Texas that wasn't showing up to drill. And, I felt almost pained by it because of how many times I had talked to this specific soldier about, how their career was in their own hands and how they could do these certain steps to improve it. But they kept making these opposite steps. And sometimes when you're acting first sergeant, you feel like a father figure. So what have you done to deal with that kind of feeling of failure when you're
you can't take it, I talk about you got to be personally own it, but you can't take it personally. You have to be personally engaged in it and have that feeling, I want to be the best, but then you also have to understand that every individual is a human, and life situations, life stress, how they were raised has a factor in their thought processes. And not every soldier is going to make the right decision. Not every soldier is going to stay in the Army. Not every soldier is going to be a great soldier in the Army. The Army's been around 200 plus years, and there's been sad sacks from day one. Mm-hmm. You can't take that personally. What you do is, what I tell young NCOs and even senior NCOs, if you can look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and said, I think I did everything I could do, then you're okay. You may not be happy because of that soldier not coming back, and that's okay, and that's good. You're not happy, but you can't let it eat you away. Right. It's not they're kind of like your kids, but they're not. Now, if your own kids have problems and struggles, it eats you away because it's darn personal. Right. Your soldiers feel like your children and your kids, but they're not. Mm-hmm. But you got to realize that they're adults, and adults make their decisions, and you do everything you can, where it's getting them better at PT, make weight, come to drill, go to school to get promoted. You try to give them all the tools and empowerment and encouragement, but and at the end of the day, they still are going to make a decision one way or the other. And you take instead of taking that real personal, you say, okay, I did everything I could, I believe, but you focus on the ones that are still there, still trying, still wanting it. Is how you do it.
So you try to raise them as leaders,
yes,
to hopefully inspire others.
Yeah. You take the good news stories that keep you going. Otherwise, most people just feel like a failure a lot.
Yeah.
And it's like I told soldiers when I had a fit camp years ago. You're here for a reason. Of course, and I'd ask, what's those reasons? Well, to get off weight, pass PT, re-enlist in the Army, and get promoted. And I said, oh, okay, no, that's not really the reason. Now, the selfish side of me, Army side, says, yes, that's the reason, because I need you to pass PT and weight, get promoted, stay in the Army, be an asset to the Army. Yep, got it. But the real reason is you, the soldier. Be healthy, be fit for long-term life, where you stay in the Army or not, and be successful. That's the goal. And even if they walk away, hopefully they walk away the right way, not be an unsat and get kicked out.
Yeah.
But they walk away, yep, my list is up, I'm over. Thank you for your service, and hopefully you go on and be successful in your life, because that was the goal.
Right.
The short terms, be successful in the Army, but the real goal is, where you stay in the Army or not, you're a success as a person long term. Have a happy family life, great kids, great job, career, blah, the whole thing.
Yeah.
But nobody thinks about it that way.
We probably should.
We need to, and I try to talk to soldiers like you did with yours. I try to talk to them like that.
Yeah.
Some will get it, some don't. Some won't get it for a couple more years as they mature. That old adage that they just think you're telling war stories, and then when they start having their own kids, and then they say, oh yeah, you were right, just like your own kids did. My own kids done, and all my kids are, in their 20s or higher, so they don't like to admit to mom and dad that, oh, okay, what you said back then was right, but because we grew up and we lived it ourselves, so
yeah,
when you're young, you know it all.
One thing I noticed with my soldiers that I've had, every soldier can relate to failure. Oh. It's a good place to talk to them about like how you have come out of that.
My concern is that the newer generation, they're relating to failure is life altering. Because how they were raised. Look at it, everybody gets a trophy. Where you win or lose, everybody gets a trophy. And I'm not saying that's bad, but you don't learn adversity in your life that way.
And I think we're oftentimes fighting culture, because American culture tends to be very individualistic, and whereas Army culture tends to be more communal, and trying to get people who normally are thinking in terms of what am I going to do next for myself to what about us as a group, as as a unit, what are we going to do for us, I think can be a challenge.
Oh, absolutely. It starts right in basic training and AIT, and we train our soldiers a little different. Different generation. I'm not saying it's bad, but in the past, that's the whole concept. You take a civilian, throw them in with a bunch of other civilians. You put them all through extreme hardship, because that's what it is. Tear them down, get them to realize, hey, you're not an individual. You won't succeed unless you do it together, and then you bring them back as the collective. I'm not sure we're providing as much hardship compared to, as you said, because the young soldiers now grow up with smartphones. They're all about texting, all that other stuff. They don't even like to talk to each other very much. So, are we stressing them enough in basic to get them past that to rebuild them as a collective group? I'm just not sure. And then you throw them in the Army Reserve, where you only have them 2 days a month, and then it's harder yet. And but you're right. It's hard. I've not quite cracked the code, but each individual is different.
Yeah. And
that's what leadership's supposed to be. You got to figure each one out, and each one has a button.
Right.
And once you find it, great stuff will happen.
Yeah. It seems like this program is aimed at also trying to remind reserve soldiers, when you're in civilian land, you're still a soldier.
Oh, absolutely. I tell you, with the cell phones, connecting with your soldiers is very easy today. computers. I know most people don't even have computers anymore, but don't even do email. They do all the stuff on their phone. I remember coming off after doing A7 and becoming a squad leader or platoon sergeant. They gave us a calling card, AT&T calling card, because back then there was no cell phones. Everything was long distance. So if you were a leader, they gave you a calling card to use to call your soldiers. Now don't need that because everybody has phones, cell phones, and it's easy. Seems easy.
Well, there are new challenges with that. It's also easy for people to ignore you.
Absolutely. Well, it's noise.
Right.
As I tell people, social media, as a police officer, I'm not a fan of social media, but social media is everywhere, and there's so much information. You don't have so much time. So what you decide individually, what you're really interested in, that's what you're going to focus on, because everything else is just too much.
Right.
So will you catch that email? Will you catch that text? Maybe you will, maybe you won't. So it's about building that squad, those teams back to feel that connection. So even when they walk away from the uniform for those 3 weeks a month, they'll stay connected somehow.
So that brings me to my next question. How do you see, with these challenges, how do you see rolling this program out? How are we going to get this initiative to Joe?
That's a good idea, or a good question, and that's why this podcast is important.
Yeah.
Try to get the initial out. I know the SMA's had at least one live stream podcast. He's may have had more, but I know he's had one already where he brought in squad leaders and tell their good stories. So that's the information campaign. But that's why we have to develop something that can be touched. So like the pocket cards, the GTA cards, the program, something that's touched, tangible. Because if all we do is do an information campaign, it won't get down to that squad leader and that team leader where it needs to get, because it's just all the noise.
Yeah.
So I'll bring this working group in next week or the following week. I'll give them the basic guidelines, and I want them, with those young squad leaders they bring with them, to come up with good ideas. I don't want to produce ideas for them. I have a few. I'll throw them at them, say, think of these, but develop something that's going to be hands-on. I don't want an app. I don't want a technology thing. I want something that non-commissioned officers they can feel it. They have to touch it. They have to personally interact with their soldiers, not send them a text, not track them on an app, but actually sit down, look them in the eye, and say, "How are you doing?
Yeah.
Hey, I need you to do this. You need this training, or you're weak here on your PT, or so because that interaction is what's going to do it.
Right.
That personal connection is what's going to do it, and not sure if we can provide hardship. So they'll bond, because most people don't realize that's what it's all about.
Right.
Where it's basic train, where it's going out, for your 2-week annual train, and it's 0 degrees out, and you're all suffering because of the cold.
Yeah.
You suffer together. Now you got a connection.
Yeah, these shared experiences.
Absolutely.
What do you personally hope will come out of this project?
Well, it's right. It's my goals from the day I started almost 3 years ago, and that is improve the non-commissioned officer corps. And if we educate some, we empower some, and young NCOs are taking ownership of their team, squad, platoon, then we're successful. And it'll grow. Because think about this. Sergeant Richardson, as a team leader, if he learns it and understands it and just know, hey, this is good stuff, when he becomes squad leader Richardson, he will empower, he'll train his 3 young team leaders to do it. He becomes platoon sergeant Richardson, he'll train his 3 squad leaders to do it. Comes first sergeant, so it grows.
Right.
I told General Lucky from day one that to get our change that we need and get after what I'm trying to do with the NCOs, I had to get to the E7s and below. Because they'll grow in the Army, take more responsibility, take more rank, and then they'll know and they'll pass it back down to the next level like we're supposed to. Train your subordinates to replace you. Just the officers the same way, but that's not, I don't check, I'm not doing stuff with the officers, but the same thing, those majors, captains, lieutenants, same way.
Yeah.
If we teach and show them the right thing, when they grow to be commanders and senior staff officers, they pass it back down to the next generation.
And really that goes back to, the core of how our Army works. You get knocked down by illness, bullet, whatever it is, the next in line should be able to pick up after you and pick up the banner.
Absolutely. You should never be afraid that your subordinate NCOs are good. I'm not sure afraid's the right word, but some of them are very leery because it's like, well, they can replace me. Exactly.
Yeah.
They should be able to replace you.
Yeah.
Don't mean they will.
Right.
Because if you train them to do it, that means you're doing it. So everybody will see that Sergeant First Class Richardson, the platoon sergeant, trained his squad leaders right because they're high speed. Mm-hmm. Richardson will get promoted to Master Sergeant. One of the squad leaders get promoted to Sergeant First Class. That's the way it's supposed to work.
That could be an interesting talking point. If you're afraid that your NCO below you can't do your job, maybe that's your problem.
Yeah. Or can do your job, it's okay.
Yeah.
Because somebody helped him or her do it. Now, if you weren't the one, then maybe you should be a little nervous because then maybe you're not doing the right thing. But if you're doing the right thing, you've trained them to replace you or even move on to bigger and better things and leave you,
right?
It's okay.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, well, that's my good one. I don't want to let them go. But for the better good of the Army as a whole, you got to let people grow and move on and share their talents somewhere else. I've always been a proponent of that. Yeah. But, everybody's like, oh, that's my great NCO or that's my great NCOs. Why should I let them go be a drill sergeant? Because they're great. You got to let them go and spread it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then grow the next one.
Yeah.
The next one gets in that position and work with them and grow them. You should take pride in how many NCOs that you've groomed and mentored that's gotten promoted and moved on to bigger, better things. That's your reward, not the ribbon on your chest and not a coin. Your reward is your soldiers growing and moving on and doing great things.
Is there anything that you would like to personally add about this campaign?
I tell you, as I move on to a new chapter in my life after 36 years, I'm not looking to leave a legacy. That's not what we do. I guess I want to be able to walk away, know I made it better. Moved the needle. The NCO Corps is moving. Not that we were bad, but we could be better. And that's what we should always strive for. Everybody should strive for that every day, getting better. So when I walk away here soon, my hopes is that I've helped our NCO Corps get a little better. I always challenge senior non-commissioned officers. I speak to the nominative leader course, which is usually one-star CSMs or going to be a one-star CSM, and they meet at Carlisle Barracks, and they get 2 weeks of, for a better term, strategic training, how to think bigger, because you're now going to be over a bigger element as a GO CSM. Think bigger picture, get away from the tactical, get to the higher strategic organization. And I always speak to them, and we always, they always ask, as we become a nominative CSM, a GO CSM, what things should we be doing different? And of course, all this, a lot of the senior CSMs there, the SMA speaks to them, the guard sergeant major speaks to them, and some of the other 4-star CSMs, and I do a different twist. What I say is, okay, all that stuff is great, and you got to do it. Here's what I'm going to challenge you. You're going to be the senior non-commissioned officer of a relatively large organization. You're going to assess it, and you're going to put your twist on it, whether it's how we train, how we think, how we do things. That's what senior leaders do, officers and NCOs. You come in, see where the unit is, make your tweaks. I said, good to go. But you'll walk away. The new CSM will come in and will do the exact same thing.
Right.
So what you've done, most of it's going to be gone. Some of those soldiers will take it and move on with it, but, as a whole.
Yeah.
But here's what could continue on forever. What are you going to do to improve your NCO Corps in your command? Because if you improve those young NCOs, they're going to move on and it's going to live long term. That's critical.
Right.
Because you'll move on, do something else, somebody else come in, tweak those things you tweaked as an organization and, how you operate. But the NCOs, that mass group of NCOs will grow and it will grow and it will continue. So how do you improve them as a senior non-commissioned officer in that element so you have a long-term effect? Not a legacy, but a long-term effect on the NCO Corps.
And the NCOs are the continuity. I mean, the officers tend to come and go in the reserve, but
Absolutely. Because, they're lieutenants or platoon leaders, section leaders, and then they're becoming XO, and then they become the commander, and then they have to move on. There's nowhere else to go.
Mm-hmm.
They move up and up and up. But you're right. The soldiers grow in that unit.
Mm-hmm.
Big bunch of them will stay in it for a long time, and they grow into the NCOs, and the NCOs are there long term.
Mm-hmm.
Should be the ownership of that unit is the NCO Corps.
It's not a stretch to say that a healthy Corps is a healthy Army.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thanks for coming today, Sergeant Major. I think that's all the time we have for today. We'll be eager to have you again soon. Are you going to be talking about ACFT next, or?
I tell you, I think we got another schedule, but I think they wanted me to talk about my career as I fade away.
All right.
Okay. So that one's going to be hard because I don't like talking about myself, but it's all good.
Okay. All right. Well, that's it for this edition of the Leader's Corner. We have upcoming episodes on UCMJ actions for reserve soldiers, election year rules, and important information about the new Army Combat Fitness Test. We look forward to seeing you again. Thanks for listening. Thank you for joining us today on this edition of the Leader's Corner. For more information about this podcast or the Army Reserve, go to usar.army.mil or download the Double Eagle app in the Google Play Store for your mobile device. We hope to see you next time. Thanks for joining.